She was in the right terminal. And she knew it because her name was already on the list. So when the woman walked up to tell her she didn't belong there, Zita didn't move. The booking confirmation was on her phone. Her name was on the list. She had handed her carry-on to the desk attendant 6 minutes ago and was now standing near the window with a brief she needed to finish before the flight, minding her business entirely. Chaeyoung had seen the carry-on first, then the woman holding it. The math she did was instant and wrong. Zita did not hear Chaeyoung approach. She felt her, the specific disturbance of someone crossing a room with intent, the way certain people moved through spaces like they were already in an argument with them. "Excuse me." Zita looked up from her phone. The woman in front of her looked expensive, and the way she smiled made it clear this wasn't going to be polite. "This is a private terminal." "I know," Zita said. "Then you know you're in the wrong place." The smile held. The eyes didn't match it. A slow look, shoes, dress, carry on, back up to face, the kind of inventory that wasn't really about clothing. The main terminal is back through those doors. You really can't miss it. Zita held her gaze. She didn't move. "I have a booking. I'm sure you think you do." The woman stepped closer. Close enough that it was no longer a conversation, but a positioning. She didn't correct her. She didn't argue. Not because she had nothing to say, but because she didn't waste words on people who didn't matter yet. But people like you always end up somewhere they're not supposed to be. "I'm trying to save you the embarrassment." "You're welcome." "People like you." Zita let the words sit in the air between them. Let the room hear them clearly. Then she said, very evenly, "People like me." Zita let that sit. Just long enough. "You heard me." The woman turned to the desk attendant. "Can someone help her find the correct terminal? She seems confused." The attendant opened his mouth. Closed it. "She's not confused." The voice came from behind them. And the room shifted. Kong Ji-won didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. 2 men stood behind him, silent, watchful. He stopped beside Zita. Not in front of her. Beside her. He looked at the woman in the expensive coat. Chaeyoung. One word. The temperature in it did everything else. She pivoted. The smile recalibrated in under a second, warmer now, directed at him, the performance shifting audiences without missing a beat. "Ji-won. I was just helping. I saw what you were doing." His eyes moved briefly to Zita. Something in them, not quite an apology, but the sincere acknowledgement of one, offered without theater. Then back to Chaeyoung. "We're leaving." He looked at Zita once more. Quietly. "I'm sorry for this." Zita met his gaze for exactly 1 second. Steady. Unhurried. "You didn't do it." She went back to her brief. He watched her for a moment, 1 moment, longer than necessary, then turned and walked toward the exit. Chaeyoung followed, her heels sharp against the marble. The terminal exhaled. Zita turned a page. Read the same paragraph twice without absorbing it. Filed the whole thing away under things that happen and went back to work. Stay right here. Because the woman who stood still in that terminal is about to walk into a courtroom, and the woman who humiliated her is about to find out exactly who she's been dealing with. This story is just getting started. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe if you're new here. The car pulled away from the terminal before Chaeyoung finished her first sentence. "Can you imagine?" she snapped. "Standing there like she belonged. In our terminal. And then you apologized to her?" "Chaeyoung. You embarrassed me. I've heard enough." He turned from the window to look at her then, fully, directly, with the particular quality of attention that made people feel examined rather than seen. "This is not the first time. The way you speak to people. The way you move through rooms deciding who matters and who doesn't." A pause. Deliberate. Final. "It will not happen again." Chaeyoung opened her mouth. Something in his face closed the argument before it started. Not anger, something worse. Exhaustion. The specific exhaustion of a man who has made a decision and is no longer interested in the conversation around it. The rest of the drive was silent. Outside the terminal, in the mild afternoon air, Zita's father's car was exactly where he said it would be. Emmanuel Okaro was a man of precise habits and reliable appearances. She got in and sat quietly. Her father waited. He had always known how to wait. "Someone decided I was in the wrong terminal," she said finally. He glanced at her. "Back at the road." And I had a booking. So, she leaned her head back against the headrest. I'm tired, Dad. Your mother made pepper soup. The smile came before she could stop it. Then I'm less tired. He drove in silence. The comfortable kind. Home was warm. Emmanuel Okoro had never been interested in size as a statement. Comfortable, full of books, the particular warmth of a space that had been genuinely lived in. Her mother, Grace, met her at the door with the pepper soup already in a pot and questions already forming. You look tired. Did you eat on the plane? How was the conference? Why didn't you call when you landed? Mom, I'm just asking. Mom, I just walked in. Grace Okoro absorbed this without offense. She had 4 decades of practice absorbing Zita's particular brand of gentle resistance and redirected immediately to the soup, which was, as always, exactly right. Dinner was warm. Familiar. Your sister didn't wait this long, her mother said gently. Mom. Her father said nothing. Zita went to bed that night thinking about the Adeyemi case, the filing deadline, the witness statement she needed to review, the argument she was still shaping. She thought about the conference. She thought about what she needed to do tomorrow. She did not think about the private terminal. She did not think about the man who had appeared beside her like a room reorganizing itself. She did not think about the one moment, just slightly longer than necessary, when he had looked at her before he left. She told herself that very deliberately, and almost believed it. Kang Juan had built a life where things worked because he expected them to. People, systems, outcomes. Chaeyoung had been one of the few decisions he already knew needed to end. He had been looking for the exit for a while. Not because he made decisions carelessly, but because Chaeyoung had slowly shown him who she really was. The airport was not the first incident. It was the one he had watched happen to a woman standing completely, quietly still, a woman who had held her ground without a word and then gone back to her brief without performing her composure for the room. He was still looking for the clean exit when Chaeyoung found it for him. The video surfaced on a Tuesday. Chaeyoung shouting. A waitress trying to de-escalate. A shove. And a fall that turned everything public. By Wednesday morning it had been viewed 400,000 times. Thursday, Chaeyoung's family lawyers had contacted the waitress, a 23-year-old named Emily, working 2 jobs, no savings, no legal representation. The letter was dressed in formal language, but the message was simple. We will sue you for disrupting our client's evening and damaging her reputation. Settle now or face proceedings you cannot afford. Emily sat in her small apartment with the letter on her kitchen table and did not know what to do. Zita watched the video once. Then again. By the 3rd time, she had already decided. She made 2 calls. Found Emily through a mutual contact by Friday afternoon. I can't pay a lawyer, Emily said. She was trying to hold her voice steady. Not quite managing. I can't even. You won't need to, Zita said. Emily looked at her. Why would you? Because I watched the video. Zita folded her hands on the table. And I know what I saw. And someone should say so in a room where it counts. The hearing was on a Thursday morning. Chaeyoung arrived with her family's legal team, 3 lawyers, expensive suits, the coordinated confidence of people accustomed to outcomes that money shapes before the proceedings begin. She scanned the courtroom the way she scanned every room, quickly, categorically, the practiced sorting of spaces into people who mattered and people who didn't. She saw Zita at the plaintiff's table. Dark suit, natural hair pulled back, reviewing documents like the room didn't matter. Chaeyoung's eyes moved over her. Something, a flicker of something, crossed her face. Then a small sound. A dismissal. She said something to her lawyer without taking her eyes off Zita. Her lawyer looked away. Said something back that she didn't seem satisfied by. Then the session began. Zita stood. Stated her name. Stated her capacity. Counsel for the plaintiff. And for the first time, Chaeyoung actually looked at her properly. The sound Chaeyoung made was small. Involuntary. Her lawyer put a hand briefly on her arm, a professional studying, the practiced gesture of someone managing a client who had just understood something they hadn't anticipated. What followed was not complicated. Zita did not make it complicated. She presented the case with the same economy she brought to everything that mattered, precise, unhurried, no decoration. The video. The witnesses. The medical documentation of Emily's shoulder injury. The timeline of the threatening letter sent to a woman with no resources 48 hours after the incident. The pattern established through 2 prior documented incidents of Chayoung using her family's legal apparatus as a weapon against people she had harmed. She didn't raise her voice once. The ruling didn't take long. Guilty. Substantial fine. Formal record. The counter-threat against Emily was dismissed with costs awarded to the plaintiff. Emily was crying quietly in the second row. Zita squeezed her arm once, briefly, then gathered her documents. Outside on the courthouse steps the afternoon was bright and cold. Zita came through the doors and stopped to put her files in her bag. She was thinking about her next case. She looked up. Kang Juwon was at the bottom of the steps. He had come for the proceedings. She would understand later why. The specific sense of responsibility he felt for what Chayoung had done in the world while wearing the implicit credibility of his name. He was standing with 2 of his men, hands in his pockets, and his eyes were already on her when she came through the doors. Recognition landed on both of them at the same moment. The terminal. The apology. The brief. Something moved through the air between them, quick, unspoken, the specific electricity of 2 people who have thought about a moment more than they've admitted and are now standing inside it again. Then he walked up the steps toward her. She didn't move. "Counselor," he said. "Hello. I didn't know it was your. It doesn't matter." His voice was quiet, direct. "You took her case. That matters more." He looked at her for a moment. "You won." "Emily won," Zita said. "I just made the argument." Something moved in his expression. That particular quality of attention, the kind that processed what was actually being said rather than what was being performed. "I owe you an apology," he said. "A proper one. Not in the middle of a scene. You already. Not properly." He held her gaze. "Coffee. Whenever you're free. Wherever you want." Zita looked at him. No entitlement in the ask. No assumption of yes. "People don't actually do that," she said. "I do." She was quiet for a moment. Then she reached into her bag and produced a card. Held it out. "In case you ever need a lawyer," she said. He took it. "I'll be the judge of that." She almost smiled. Went down the steps and got in a cab. He watched it until it turned the corner. Then he stood there for one more moment in the cold, bright afternoon with her card in his hand. He ended things with Chayoung that evening. He drove her home from the courthouse. She had insisted, and he had agreed because he intended to say what needed to be said, and he preferred to say things once, directly, without delay. She talked for most of the drive. About the ruling, about the fine, about the lawyer, that lawyer, and how the whole thing had been handled unfairly, and how her father's team would be filing an appeal, and how Juwon needed to understand what this had done to their family's reputation. He let her talk. He had learned, with Chayoung, that interruption only lengthened things. At her door, he stopped. "This is done," he said. She turned. Read his face. Something shifted behind her eyes, the first real fear he had seen there, beneath all the performance and the certainty and the lifelong assumption that things worked out for her because they always had. "What do you mean?" "Us. This. It's done." Ju-won, her voice recalibrated. Softer now. The version from the beginning, when she was still working at it. "Our families. Your father. Everything we've built. Is my concern to manage." He looked at her steadily. Not a reason to continue something that should have ended a long time ago. "You can't just," she stopped herself. Tried again. "We are supposed to get married." That was the plan. "Our families." "Good night, Chayoung." He turned. Got in the car. The door closed. She stood on the step. Watched the car until it was gone. Stood there in the cold for another moment after that. Then she went inside. Sat in her apartment in the silence. And felt something harden past the hurt, past the shock, into something colder and more purposeful. She picked up her phone. He wasn't leaving her for nobody. She was going to make sure of that. A month later. A quiet bookshop. Zita wasn't really reading. She was thinking. She heard him before she saw him, or rather, she felt the particular reorganization of a space that happened when Kang Ju-won entered it. He came around the corner of the aisle and stopped. They looked at each other. "The lawyer," he said. "The man who apologizes for other people's behavior." The corner of his mouth moved. Almost. Kong Juan. I know who you are. She closed the book. Zita Okoro. I know. At her expression, I asked. After the courthouse. She absorbed this. Filed it. The girlfriend. Is not my girlfriend. A pause. Hasn't been for 3 months. Zita looked at him for a long moment. The careful assessment she brought to everything, reading the fact of what was being said rather than the presentation of it. Then she turned back to the shelf and replaced the book. Good for you, she said. He leaned against the shelf across from her. Unhurried. Coffee. The apology I still owe you. You apologized at the terminal. That was a statement. Not an apology. He watched her scan the shelf. There's a difference. Is there? Zita said. Zita stopped scanning the shelf. Turned to look at him properly. People really don't do that, she said. I do. She looked at him for another moment. Then, can I at least get your number? In case I need a lawyer. She laughed, a real one, surprised out of her, the kind that couldn't be managed because it arrived too fast. She gave him the card again. He already had one. She suspected he still had it, but he took this one without mentioning that. Coffee was at a place she chose. Her neighborhood, her terms, her comfort. He arrived without a driver. Without the infrastructure of his world. Just him, in a coat, 5 minutes early, already seated when she got there with the look of a man who is content to wait. They talked for 3 hours. He told her about Chae-young plainly, without bitterness, without the performance of a man trying to make himself look good in the retelling. A family arrangement that had never been a real relationship. A decision made for strategic reasons that he had stayed in past the point of sense, because he hadn't had a clean reason to leave that wasn't just this isn't working. What changed? She asked. He looked at his coffee. Then at her. I started understanding the cost of staying. She nodded slowly. Let it sit. Didn't press. She told him about her work, the cases that mattered, the ones that kept her at her desk at midnight, the ones where the outcome was the difference between someone's life going one way or another. He listened the way she had noticed he listened, completely, without waiting for his turn, asking questions that showed he had actually processed what she'd said. He asked her to dinner before their cups were empty. Dinner turned into more. More time. More conversations. Something steady. Something intentional. Her mother noticed at Sunday dinner 3 weeks in. The particular difference in her daughter's face, something slightly easier, slightly less contained. Grace Okoro did not miss things like that. Who is he? Mum. I'm just. Mum. Her father's eyes met hers across the table. The familiar alliance. He said nothing, which was its own kind of support. He asked her on a Tuesday evening. Her apartment. Food they had attempted to cook together and mostly failed at, something involving rice that had somehow gone wrong at the most basic level, which had produced genuine laughter from both of them, which had felt like something. He looked at her across the counter with the expression she had catalogued by now, the one that arrived when something confirmed what he already knew. I want you to be my girlfriend, he said. Properly. If you want that. She looked at him. Yes, she said. Simply. Without deliberation. The way she said things when she already knew. His parents' home was warm in the way of spaces that had been genuinely lived in for a long time. His mother, small, sharp, the specific intelligence of a woman who had navigated her husband's world for 40 years and emerged with her character entirely intact. Read Zita in the first 20 minutes and asked real questions for the rest of the evening. Not social questions. Real ones. About her cases. About her father. About what she believed in, what she was building, what mattered. Zita answered without performing. Straight, warm, exactly herself. His father said less. Watched more. Halfway through the main course, Zita mentioned her father's name in the context of a case she'd referenced. Emmanuel Okoro. Retired judge. Kong Byungsa put down his chopsticks. Emmanuel Okoro. He said it the way people said names they recognized from somewhere important. Then he looked at his son. Then back at Zita. Something rearranged in his entire expression, the patriarch's assessment dissolving into something warmer, almost delighted. Your father and I did business together. 15, 16 years ago. A man of complete integrity. Absolute. He shook his head slowly. How is he? Zita blinked. He's well. He never mentioned. He wouldn't. Byung-se smiled. That's exactly like him. In the car afterward, Ju-won held her hand across the console. She was looking out the window at the night city, processing. Our fathers, she said. I know. Did you know? No. She turned to look at him. Is that strange? He looked back at her. It's perfect. Chae-young found out who Zita was. And she didn't like what she found. She started following them. Not personally, she wasn't careless. But she had ways of knowing where Ju-won went, who he was with, what it looked like. She collected it. Built a picture. And then one afternoon she made a mistake. They were at a market, the open kind, Saturday morning, vegetables and flowers and the ordinary business of two people moving through a weekend together. Ju-won had her hand. They were looking at something, heads close, laughing at something she couldn't hear. Chae-young was there before she had decided to be there. So it was because of her. Her voice came out louder than she intended. People nearby turned. Ju-won and Zita both turned. Chan's eyes were on Zita. Something raw in them, past performance, past strategy, just the exposed fact of a wound that had been building for months. I knew it. Her voice shook slightly. The way you looked at her at that airport. The way you looked at her outside the courthouse. I knew it then, she stopped. Looked at Zita with something that had moved past jealousy into accusation. You did this deliberately. From the beginning. You planned this. Chae-young. Ju-won's voice. The quiet kind. She didn't stop. Boyfriend snatcher. You sneaky little. Chae-young. Harder now. Zita held up one hand, briefly. I have this. She looked at Chae-young. The same unhurried quality of a woman who had stood in front of hostile energy her entire career and understood that matching it was never the point. If he was that easy to take, Zita said quietly, what does that tell you about what you had? No one spoke. Chae-young's mouth opened. Nothing came out. The argument she had prepared, the accusations, the evidence she'd collected, the things she'd rehearsed in her apartment, all of it met that single sentence and found nothing to stand on. Ju-won stepped forward. His voice was very quiet, very final. If you come near her again, near either of us, in any form, you will understand what it costs to test me on something personal. Do you understand me? Chae-young looked at him. At Zita. Back at him. Something in her face collapsed, not dramatically, just quietly. The specific deflation of someone who has just fully understood that the thing they were fighting for is already completely gone. She turned. Walked away through the market crowd without looking back. Ju-won watched until she was gone. Then he looked at Zita. She was already looking at the flowers on the stall in front of them. Picking up a stem. Examining it with the focused attention of someone choosing carefully. You okay? He said. I'm fine. She held the flower up. What do you think? For your mother's dinner. He looked at the flower. Looked at her. The expression, the one he'd been carrying since a private terminal 14 months ago, settled into something that had nowhere left to go but forward. Perfect, he said. He went home that evening and made one call. Traced the leaked story, a gossip column piece that had run 3 days earlier, anonymous source, Zita's name attached to speculation about her motivations, her career, her relationship with Ju-won, back to Chae-young in under 2 hours. His people were efficient. They always were. He called Chae-young directly. The story you planted. He didn't preface it. Didn't ask. It landed on nothing. Her father and my father did business together for years. My mother has met her. You built something on ground that was already solid before you started digging. A pause. The next time you involve yourself in my life in any form, I will make sure every door my family's name has ever opened for yours closes. Permanently. This is the last contact between us. He hung up. Chae-young sat in her apartment with her phone on the table and understood, completely and finally, that it was over. Not the relationship, that had been over for months. The possibility. The idea that she could reverse it. The story she had been telling herself about how this ended. All of it. Over. She sat there for a long time. In the silence. In the fact of it. Then she closed her eyes. And stayed very still. And let it be what it was. His mother's birthday dinner was on a Saturday in early December. The house was full in the way it only got for the occasions that mattered: family, old friends, the particular warmth of a home that had been hosting people for decades and knew how to hold them. His mother moved through all of it with the ease of a woman who had built something real and was content to be inside it. Emmanuel Okoro arrived with grace and found Kang Byung-soo within 10 minutes. The two men shook hands and then stood talking for the rest of the evening in the way of people who had picked up exactly where they left off, as if 16 years were simply a pause in a longer conversation. Zita watched her father laugh, the real laugh, the one from home, and felt the thing in her chest she had been carefully not naming for months. Ju-won appeared beside her. She felt him before she saw him. She always did now. "Your father hasn't stopped talking," he said. "Neither has yours." They stood together watching the room. Comfortable. The specific ease of two people who had stopped performing for each other a long time ago. His mother tapped her glass from across the room. The warm noise of the dinner settled into attention, the natural quiet of people who sensed something was happening and wanted to be present for it. Ju-won turned to Zita. She read his face, understood what was coming, and felt, beneath the surprise she was still genuinely feeling, that she had known this was where they were going since a Saturday market when she'd picked up a flower and he'd said perfect in a tone that wasn't about the flower at all. He went down on one knee. He didn't make a speech. He said what he meant, the way he said everything that mattered, directly, without decoration, with the full weight of someone who did not say things he didn't mean. "You stood still when you were challenged. You chose what was right when it mattered. I want a life with you, Zita. Properly. Permanently." The room was very quiet. Her mother had both hands over her mouth. Her father was watching her with the expression of a man who had always trusted his daughter's judgment and was watching it be confirmed. Zita looked at this man, who had appeared beside her in a private terminal and apologized for something he hadn't done, who had found her in a bookshop and remembered her coffee order, who listened when she talked and meant what he said, and had never once asked her to be anything other than exactly what she was. "Yes," she said. For the second time. The last time. The one that counted most. The room came alive. Emmanuel Okoro shook Kang Byung-soo's hand again, and this time both men were grinning in the way of fathers who had just watched something good happen and knew they had been, in some quiet way, part of making it possible. Ju-won slid the ring on her finger and stood and looked at her. The way he had looked at her since a private terminal when she had stood completely still under pressure and not moved an inch. Like, she was the fixed point. If this story moved you, subscribe for more stories like this, 'cause you won't want to miss what's coming next. If someone disrespected you like that in public, what would you have done?